The way I see it, this offseason already feels different for the San Francisco 49ers, and if you've been paying attention to the cap situation, you probably feel it too. Last year at this time, everything revolved around survival mode. The Niners were buried under dead money. They were forced to let key players walk, and the entire approach was about getting younger, getting cheaper, and resetting the books. Fast forward to now, and suddenly the conversation has completely shifted. Instead of asking who they have to lose, we're talking about who they can actually go get. Right now, San Francisco sits comfortably in the top half of the league in cap space, with over $23 million available and just under $19 million in effective cap space. And I know those numbers can sound confusing, so let me put it simply. Cap space is what's technically available today. Effective cap space factors in draft picks and roster requirements. Either way, the important takeaway is the 49ers finally have breathing room again. And that matters because John Lynch already told us during his end-of-season press conference that the team expects to have more flexibility this offseason. When a general manager says that out loud, that's not accidental. That's a signal that tells me they're preparing to be more aggressive. If you think about what they just went through, it makes sense. They absorbed over $100 million in dead money last year. They made tough decisions. They focused on extensions for Brock Purdy, Fred Warner, and George Kittle. They leaned heavily into the draft. That was the reset year. This is the pivot year. This is where you start adding again. And before we go any further, if you're excited about this offseason and want daily for Niners coverage, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and turn on notifications. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you helps make that happen. Also, quick question for you. Right now, do you think the Niners should be aggressive in free agency this offseason? Just drop a yes or no in the comments. I'm curious where you stand. What makes this even more interesting is that the money they already have might not be the full story. Because the 49ers also have several realistic moves that could make to open up even more cap space. And I'm not talking about fantasy cuts or Madden trades. These are legitimate roster decisions that could free up meaningful dollars heading into free agency. That's why this conversation really starts to heat up. The team already has flexibility, but with a few calculated decisions, they could create enough room to seriously pursue impact players. And that's where this offseason starts to feel powerful. We're not just talking about bargain bin signings anymore. We're talking about potential upgrades at safety, along the offensive line, and even on the defensive front. But here's the key: none of that happens unless the front office is willing to move on from certain players. Some of these names might surprise you. Some of them probably won't, and that's exactly what we're diving into next, because when you look closely at the contracts, the performance, and the positional needs, 5 players stand out as realistic cap casualties. Once you see the numbers tied to each one, you'll understand just how much financial flexibility San Francisco can unlock, and why this could completely reshape their offseason strategy. So, stick with me, because coming up, we're breaking down those 5 players one by one, how much money each move saves, and what it really means for the future of this roster. Alright, let's keep it rolling, because this is where things start to get really interesting. When you look at the 49ers roster through a financial lens, there are 5 players who stand out as realistic candidates to either be cut, moved, or heavily evaluated this offseason. And I want to be clear about something right away. This doesn't automatically mean these are bad players. This is about contracts, roster construction, scheme fit, and where the team needs to reallocate resources. Sometimes the business side of football forces uncomfortable decisions. Let's start in the secondary with Jair Brown. Brown is heading into the final year of his deal, and if he's on the roster, his cap hit sits at about $3.8 million. If the 49ers move on from him, the dead money is only around $200,000, which means they'd save roughly $3.5 million immediately. From a pure cap perspective, that's low-risk money. On the field, Brown is solid around the line of scrimmage. He plays physical, he comes downhill well, and he's not afraid to hit, but the issue is on the back end. The Niners don't currently have a true center field safety, and Brown overlaps a lot with Malik Mustafa in terms of skill set. Both guys are better operating close to the box. Neither is that natural ball-hawking coverage safety you trust deep that makes Brown a prime candidate when you're trying to free money while also reshaping the secondary. Next up is the complicated one, Brandon Ayuk. If Ayuk is on the roster next season, his cap number jumps to about $14.6 million. Cutting him outright before June 1st would come with massive dead money, close to $30 million, which obviously isn't happening. A post-June 1st designation drops a dead cap to roughly $8.3 million, but even then, the bigger story is future flexibility. The 49ers already paid out a large chunk of his guarantees, and by voiding the rest, they could clear as much as $80+ million in future commitments from 2026 through 2028. Trading him sounds nice in theory, but coming off injury, with a big contract, and questions about long-term durability, it's hard to imagine a team giving up real value while also inheriting that deal. This isn't about whether Ayuk can play. It's about cost versus uncertainty, and that's why his name keeps coming up. Then there's Bryce Huff. Huff carries a $5.3 million cap hit next season, and here's the key detail. There's no dead money if he's cut. That's a clean $5.3 million in savings. Personally, I'd keep Huff. He started the year strong with 5 sacks in his first 7 games, and then disappeared once the pass rush thinned out around him. To me, that screams situational edge rusher who needs help on the other side. He's more Robin than Batman, but every defense needs a Robin when Nick Bosa is healthy. Still, from a financial standpoint, he's an easy lever to pull. Now, let's talk about Jake Brendel. If Brendel stays, his cap number is about $5.4 million. If he's cut, the dead money is around $2.4 million, which gives you roughly $2.9 million in savings. And this one feels less like a maybe and more like a necessity. The interior offensive line struggled badly in short yardage situations. You saw it 3rd and 1, 4th and 1. The team couldn't generate push up the middle. Kyle Shanahan stopped even trying. That tells you everything. Regardless of what any grading service says, the tape shows a clear need for an upgrade at center and left guard. Brendel is serviceable, but serviceable isn't good enough if you're trying to win a Super Bowl. And finally, D. Winters. Winters carries a $3.6 million cap hit, and if he's released, the dead money is almost nothing. We're talking about roughly $30,000, which means savings of about $3.5 million. Winters is athletic and fast, but he's struggled with missed tackles and got swallowed up in the run game. He feels replaceable, especially if the linebacker room is going to be rebuilt anyway. So when you add all this up, you're looking at potential savings of around $3.5 million from Brown, $5.3 from Huff, nearly $3 from Brendel, and another $3.5 from Winters. That's already over $15 million without even factoring in the longer-term impact of the Ayuk situation. That's real money. That's the kind of flexibility that allows you to chase one high-end free agent or spread it across multiple solid upgrades. Quick pause here because I want your input. Out of these 5 players, who would you move on from first if it were your decision? Drop that name in the comments. And while you're here, make sure you like the video and subscribe if you appreciate these deep dives. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and your support truly matters. Now, here's the thing, creating cap space is only half the story. The more important question is what you actually do with it. Because this roster has very specific needs, especially at safety and along the offensive line. And there are both draft options and free agent paths that could dramatically improve this team if John Lynch plays it right. So coming up next, let's talk about where this money could go why safety is quietly becoming one of the biggest priorities on the roster, and how fixing the trenches might be the key to closing the gap in the NFC. Let's keep building on that, because once you understand how much money the 49ers could realistically free up, the focus naturally shifts from who might be leaving to how that money actually gets used. And one of the most underrated storylines heading into this offseason is the safety position. Right now, San Francisco doesn't have a true coverage safety on the roster. Ahir Brown and Malik Mustafa are very similar players. Both are physical, both play best downhill, both are solid near the line of scrimmage. But neither gives you that center field presence who can erase mistakes, track the ball deep, and consistently make plays in coverage. That becomes even more important if the defensive scheme changes. If the Niners bring in a coordinator who leans more toward man coverage, that back-end responsibility becomes magnified. You can't survive in today's NFL without at least one safety you trust to patrol the deep middle. That's why moving on from Brown, even if you like him as a player, starts to make sense from a roster-building standpoint. You keep Mustafa, who's younger and under team control longer, and you pair him with a true coverage safety. That combination gives you physicality plus range. Right now, they're missing the range. And this is where the draft enters the conversation. One name that's been popping up is Bud Clark, who turned heads during Senior Bowl practices. What stood out wasn't just athleticism, it was how sticky his coverage looked, how comfortable he was matching receivers downfield, and how natural he seemed attacking the ball in the air. You saw reps where he blanketed receivers, knocked passes away, and even came down with one-handed interceptions. Now, we're talking about a mid-round prospect here, not a first-round lock. But that's exactly where the 49ers have historically found value. Just look at Talanoa Hufanga, a fifth-round pick who developed into an All-Pro. San Francisco doesn't need to spend premium draft capital at safety if they scout correctly. But safety isn't the only pressing need. Let's talk about the offensive line, because this one is impossible to ignore. The inability to run up the middle in short yardage situations was one of the most frustrating parts of last season. 3rd and 1 became an adventure. 4th and 1 became something Kyle Shanahan actively avoided. That tells you the staff has lost confidence in the interior line. Jake Brendel is the face of that issue, but it goes beyond him. The Niners need upgrades at both center and left guard if they're serious about closing the gap on elite defenses. You can scheme around a lot of things in this league. You can't scheme around getting pushed backward at the point of attack. This is where freeing up cap space becomes critical. If you could Brendel and save nearly $3 million, that's not just money. That's leverage, that's flexibility, that's the ability to either pursue a proven veteran or position yourself to draft and develop someone while also adding depth. And while we're on the subject of trenches, let's not forget the defensive line. Bryce Huff is a perfect example of a player who flashes but needs help. He started the season hot, then disappeared once the pass rush thinned out. That doesn't mean he's bad, it means he's a complementary piece. If Nick Bosa is Batman, Huff is Robin. He works best when attention is drawn elsewhere, but if you can pair Bosa with another legitimate threat, suddenly Huff becomes much more dangerous. That's why freeing up money to add another defensive lineman could completely change how this unit looks. So now you've got 3 clear areas of focus: safety, interior offensive line, and pass rush. Before we get into specific free agents, I want to ask you this. If you had to prioritize just one position this offseason, what would it be? Safety, offensive line, or defensive line? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you're enjoying this breakdown, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. We're building something special here on Niners News, and every new subscriber helps us reach that 1,000 goal. Because once you identify the needs, the next step is obvious. You start looking at names, and there are some intriguing options out there. Some realistic, some ambitious, some that could completely change the identity of this roster if John Lynch decides to push his chips into the middle of the table. So coming up, let's walk through the free agents and potential targets that make the most sense for San Francisco, including one center who could be a massive upgrade, a pass rusher who would be a dream pairing with Bosa, and a few offensive weapons who could add speed and explosiveness to this offense. Alright, now let's talk about the fun part, because once you clear cap space and identify roster needs, this is where imagination meets reality. Let's start in free agency at safety, even though this class doesn't exactly jump off the page. You've got names like Brian Cook from Kansas City, Cam Curl from the Rams, Kevin Byard from Chicago, Jabril Peppers from Pittsburgh, Jalen Thompson out of Arizona, Kobe Bryant from Seattle, and Reed Blankenship from Philadelphia. Out of that group, Brian Cook is the one who really stands out. He's young, he's instinctive, and he's shown he can make plays in big moments. The rest feel more like solid contributors than true difference makers. That's why drafting a safety still feels like the most likely path. San Francisco has had real success finding defensive backs in the middle rounds, and pairing a rookie coverage safety with Malik Mustafa could quietly transform the secondary. But where free agency really starts to get interesting is along the offensive line. Tyler Linderbaum is the name that keeps coming up, and for good reason. He's a physical, technically sound center who thrives in a run-heavy, zone-based system, which just so happens to be exactly what Kyle Shanahan runs. He played in a complex offense in Baltimore, showed excellent awareness, and consistently created movement at the point of attack. This would be a massive upgrade over Jake Brendel. We're talking about a player who could immediately stabilize the middle of the line and make life easier for Brock Purdy while also restoring confidence in short-yardage situations. That's the type of signing that changes how your offense functions. At tight end, things get interesting too. Nobody knows exactly when George Kittle will be back to full strength, and even when he is, having another reliable option matters. Isaiah Likely is a really intriguing player who brings both blocking ability and receiving upside. If you want to get more creative, Kyle Pitts becomes fascinating. He's still in his mid-20s, his best football might be ahead of him, and if Jawan Jennings walks in free agency, Pitts could step into a similar slot role while adding size and speed. That's a different dimension for this offense. At wide receiver, Alec Pierce from Indianapolis stands out. He's led the league in yards per catch over the last 2 seasons. He's tall, he's fast, and he stretches the field vertically. Rashid Shaheed is another name that jumps off the screen. He brings speed, return ability, and gadget potential. He's the kind of player who forces defenses to account for him on every snap. Those are the types of weapons that make coordinators uncomfortable. Now let's flip back to the defensive front, because this is where things could get really spicy. John Franklin Myers offers versatility. He can play inside and outside, which gives defensive coordinators flexibility. Jalen Phillips showed how impactful he can be down the stretch, even with some injury concerns in his history. But the dream scenario, Trey Hendrickson. If Hendrickson becomes available on a short-term deal, that's the type of move that instantly elevates your pass rush. Pairing him with Nick Bosa would be unfair. You'd finally have to legitimate threats off the edge, which means quarterbacks can't just slide protection toward Bosa anymore. That changes everything for the defense. It creates easier sacks, it forces quicker throws. It helps the secondary. One signing like that has a ripple effect across the entire unit. Now let me throw this back to you. Out of all these potential targets, which one excites you the most? Tyler Linderbaum, Trey Hendrickson, Kyle Pitts, Rashid Shaheed? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed and help us hit that 1,000 subscriber mark before free agency kicks off. Also tap that like button if you want more breakdowns like this all off-season long. Because when you zoom out, this isn't just about individual players, it's about philosophy. For the first time in a while, the 49ers aren't boxed in financially. They're not stuck choosing between re-signing their own guys and filling holes. They can do both. They can be selective. They can be aggressive where it matters.